There are multiple delivery modes used in courses at Jackson College. Modes include face-to-face, hybrid, online, and HyFlex. All but HyFlex are familiar to most people. HyFlex is a fusion of hybrid and flexible. This mode combines the other three modes into one design. We will go into more detail about this in the HyFlex specific design section. Each delivery mode has its design requirements. However, there are some common considerations across modes that will be addressed first. No matter what delivery mode, the start of the design process is a review of the approved course outcomes or competencies. These stipulate that students will know and be able to do when they complete the course. This is a good time to make sure that the outcomes or competencies are stated from the student's perspective and are sufficient for the needs of any programs that include the course. The terms outcome and competency can be confusing because they are used differently by different people or in different contexts. For our purposes here, we will define competency as knowledge, skills, and behaviors that demonstrate attitudes or values. Competencies are focused on the learner, expressed in broad terms, and are often related to an educational domain, that is, math, or a job role, responsibility, or task. For example, competency might be something like demonstrating computational skills and mathematical reasoning. With the outcomes or competencies in hand, review or identify what students will need to do or provide to demonstrate that they meet each outcome or competency. You can then determine what assessments will be needed to be a part of the course and what learning activities and interactions will be needed to ensure that students will be prepared to succeed on the assessments. Like outcomes and competencies, objectives also describe something that a learner must demonstrate, but they tend to be more narrowly focused. For example, in math, an objective might be something like solve simple equations or recall the multiplication facts up to 10 times 10. As you might be able to see, the math competency provided above, demonstrate computational skills and mathematical reasoning, would contain multiple objectives like the example given. To further illustrate, we could think of the math competency like this: competency, demonstrate computational skills and mathematical reasoning. Objectives for the competency provided by ChatGPT: perform basic arithmetic operations, add, subtract, multiply, and divide whole numbers, fractions, and decimals accurately and efficiently. Apply mental math techniques. Use mental math strategies to perform calculations quickly and accurately. Solve word problems. Translate real-world problems into mathematical expressions and equations, and solve them using appropriate computational methods. Analyze patterns and relationships. Recognize and describe numerical patterns and relationships in data sets, sequences, and functions. Use estimation techniques. Estimate quantities and outcomes to assess reasonableness of results and to facilitate problem solving. Apply logical reasoning. Use deductive and inductive reasoning to make conjectures, draw conclusions, and justify mathematical arguments. Evaluate mathematical statements. Assess the validity of mathematical statements and conjectures based on logical reasoning and evidence. Utilize problem-solving strategies. Apply a variety of problem-solving strategies, such as guess and check, working backwards, and pattern recognition, to solve mathematical problems. Communicate mathematical ideas. Clearly articulate mathematical concepts, procedures, and solutions using appropriate mathematical language and notation. Analyze errors and improve solutions. Identify and correct errors in mathematical solutions through self-assessment and peer feedback, and revise solutions to improve accuracy and efficiency. From this example, you might make the connection that learning objectives expressed in this way can help a course designer organize the sequence of instruction and develop appropriate assessments. That is exactly the reason why it is helpful to think of outcomes or competencies and bundles of learning objectives. At the risk of confusing the topic, there is another form of learning objective. This is sometimes referred to as a behavioral objective. These are very specific expressions of what a learner must demonstrate that also include the conditions under which the demonstration must happen and the level of performance that must be achieved. Here is an example provided by ChatGPT. By the end of the lesson, the student will accurately multiply two-digit numbers using the standard algorithm with at least 90% accuracy on a series of 10 practice problems. This type of learning objective is extremely narrowly focused, almost to the level of being an exam question or questions. This type of learning objective is not commonly used in higher education. When they, or a slightly simplified form, are sometimes required by a program's secondary accreditation, no discussion of learning objectives is complete without mentioning Bloom's taxonomy. There are 3 different taxonomies. These are the familiar cognitive domain and the less familiar affective and psychomotor domains. These have all been revised and reimagined since the 1950s when they were published. The cognitive domain taxonomy that is frequently referenced in course design contains 6 levels which are arranged by relative complexity. They are remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Each level of the hierarchy represents a level of performance that a course designer might choose as appropriate for the course being designed. The level of performance will dictate or suggest how the objective should be assessed and will inform the types of learning activities and interactions that will be needed to get students to the point of success on the assessments. Many resources have been created to assist in this effort. Some of the most used are the lists of action verbs that have been associated with each level. These verb lists can help in the understanding of the level as well as in the writing of objectives. One can also use these lists as a sort of reverse lookup. You can locate the verb used in a course objective and look up which level that objective is written from. Then you can be sure to create or choose an appropriate assessment method. For example, if the verb in the objective is created, the assessment method would likely not be a quiz, but rather would more likely be a project. At this point you will have groups of objectives associated with each course outcome or competency. Assessments for each objective, or types of objectives, that is knowledge objectives, will be assessed on quizzes, application objectives will be assessed in a case study, and creating objectives will be part of a final project. Ideas for the types of learning interactions that will be needed to be sure that students will successfully demonstrate the outcomes or competencies of the course in the assessments. It is at this point that the delivery mode for the course begins to become more important to the design than the content of the course, because it is when you begin thinking about the learning interactions, and to a degree the types of assessment activities that will be used, that the method for implementing these becomes germane. Next, begin to design specific activities and interactions, many of which will be delivery mode dependent. As you begin to do this, it is helpful to create or adopt a pattern or structure that your modules or units may be designated by week, day, or some other label. The delivery mode will inform the learning cycle pattern you select or create. Thinking about the typical learning cycle of a course, you probably expect some variation of the following: engagement with content, opportunity to practice skills and/or enhance retention of knowledge, formative assessments, opportunity to engage with remedial supports or extension activities, and summative assessments. Depending on the amount of material covered per session, some of these may not be in each unit or section of the course. The order can also be switched. For example, a formative assessment, in the form of a pre-assessment, might be the first thing students engage with in a session. Or the content engagement might be provided as needed during project-based learning. There are many existing learning cycle patterns to choose from, or you can develop your own. The following are examples of learning cycle frameworks. There are far too many to present an exhaustive list, so be sure to do some research to find one that fits your class the best. One example is Absorb, Do, Connect. This framework was created by Horton in 2012 with 3 parts: Absorb, Do, and Connect. Absorb. The cycle begins with learners engaging with new information through reading, activities in the class, watching videos, and other methods. Do. This is a period of active engagement, practicing skills, and applying what they have learned. Connect. The framework concludes with opportunities to connect what they have been working on in real-world situations, simulations, or reflection. Connect activities are designed to help students create a reference point that helps make the learning more relevant or to aid recall in future use cases. The next example is do, reflect, apply. This experiential learning model is based on some of the work of David Kolb. The model has 3 parts: do, reflect, and apply, with 5 components within the 3 parts. Do, experience. The experience component has students engaging in a learning activity. Reflect, share and process. Sharing provides learners with an opportunity to describe what they experienced during the activity. This is a form of reflective practice that helps the student engage in the process component of the model, where the learners focus on the process used in the engagement. Apply, generalize, apply. The generalize component has students exploring how they connected with the activity and what they learned. The apply component gives students ways to connect what they have learned to their daily life, career, anticipated career, or in other ways that are meaningful to the students. As mentioned, there are many, but the last framework for this module is 5E. The 5E framework was developed by the Biological Sciences Curriculum Study. As the name suggests, it has 5 components, each starting with the letter E: engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate. Engagement. Students participate in a short activity that elicits prior knowledge and motivates students to engage. Exploration. A range of experiences such as lab activities give students a chance to activate prior knowledge as well as begin creating new ideas and asking questions. Explanation. This phase of the model encourages students to explain what they did and learned, and provides an opportunity for instructors to elaborate and focus learners in ways that help them learn more deeply. Elaboration. Students are challenged to engage in additional activities that help them deepen and broaden their understanding. The evaluation component of the model provides time for both formative and summative assessment of student learning. Evaluate. In the final stage, students revisit the engagement phase to compare their initial understanding with their current knowledge, addressing and correcting any misconceptions. They reflect on their learning and demonstrate it through writing, discussion, and demonstration. Research suggests that skipping the evaluation stage is not advisable. Rather than a unit test, formal evaluation occurs afterward, with teachers assessing learning through problem scenarios and various assessments, such as formative or summative evaluations. These frameworks provide a structure that organizes course resources, activities, and assessments in patterns that reduce cognitive load and help course designers create courses that are well organized and consistent with their ideas about how to best engage their learners. As mentioned previously, each delivery mode suggests or imposes its design parameters. There are as many ways to design a course as there are designers. This section will discuss some design considerations for each delivery mode. Divide the bundles of learning objectives into the number of course meetings you anticipate the class schedule to permit. Then you can distribute the formative and summative assessments at places that seem appropriate, build the assessments, and plan the face-to-face engagements needed to ensure that students are prepared to be successful when they arrive at the assessments in the schedule. There are 2 main approaches to designing a face-to-face course. We won't discuss the third design method of waiting until the day of class to decide what to do. The first method is to determine the course calendar and, if applicable, put the placeholders in the appropriate places for assessments such as exams, then begin developing learning interactions starting with the first day of class and moving through the calendar until the end of the term. In this method, you place yourself in the mindset of what you want to or should do in each session, and as do you apportion the groups of objectives into the schedule around the assessments. The second method of designing a face-to-face course is to not think about the calendar because the calendar changes each term. Instead, this approach focuses on creating units of learning that are independent of a calendar and instead are centered around the groups of objectives or topics in the course. A caution here is to not rely too much on the structure of the current textbook because, as you know, the next edition will change the order in ways that will force a redesign. The benefit of this approach is that in subsequent semesters you can adjust the course to the calendar by assigning one or more units of instruction to cover the material needed for the class. This is especially helpful if the institution has different semi-semesters such as our current 7-week, 15-week, and sometimes 12-week possibilities. In both methods you use the learning cycle you have chosen to help guide the process. You still have the flexibility to adjust as you begin development. You may want to use the Canvas Learning Management System (LMS) to help you organize materials and provide support for students. Some instructors like to use online assignment submission to reduce paper use. Still others use in-Canvas quizzes to motivate students to read the text, as a formative assessment, and as a way for students to practice elements of the content. A hybrid class combines face-to-face class meetings and online coursework. The idea is to replace some of the contact time that normally happens in a face-to-face class with online activities. It is important to ensure that the online work is not just the homework that is normally assigned. The online portions of the class need to be learning engagement with contact between the student and the instructor as well as the content. Hybrid courses can help institutions make better use of space and can use the best parts of each delivery mode to keep students engaged and save them time and travel. There are many ways to structure a hybrid class. Each lends itself to different ways of engaging with students and different teaching approaches. A lot of the choice has to do with how one intends to use each mode. It is a good idea to consider the relative strengths and weaknesses of each mode as you proceed with your design. The face-to-face mode works best for discussions, debates, small group projects, and monitoring assessments. With the advent of generative AI, many instructors like to include in-class writing tasks during face-to-face time so they can get to know student writing styles and abilities, as well as to reduce the relative perceived advantage of submitting an AI-generated essay. Whatever your choice, use the structure, or mix and match as needed, that best fits your situation. Probably the most common hybrid structure is every other meeting model. The course alternates face-to-face and online meetings. There are two advantages to this model. First, the institution can potentially schedule more classes in the same classroom space because of the predictability of the structure. The second advantage is in many cases this means that students have a face-to-face class meeting each week because most college classes often have at least 2 course meetings per week. Some ideas for using this structure effectively are to use the online portions of the class as work related to the prior face-to-face class meeting and/or preparation for the next face-to-face class meeting. For example, the first face-to-face class meeting might include an orientation to the course, some introductory and team-building activities, and a high-level overview of the content. The next portion of the class, being online, would have students completing a syllabus quiz to ensure that they have an opportunity to refocus attention on the course requirements, assignments, and institutional policies such as AI use, academic honesty, and the like. Then the students might be expected to watch an instructor-created video that provides the first unit of instructor-provided instruction with an embedded formative assessment or learning check. The homework for the week would have students submitting a study calendar and assigned readings that prepare them for the next face-to-face class period. A less common hybrid structure, but one that is worth considering, is a synchronous online model. In this mode there are typically fewer face-to-face classes, those being reserved for high-stakes testing, with the online meetings including a blend of synchronous online meetings and online work. Think of this more like a virtual learning environment such as many classes adopted in the wake of the COVID shutdown periods. The idea is to replicate some of the face-to-face components of a traditional class using video conferencing tools. With institutional support and some planning, these could be required meetings just like a face-to-face course, or they can be optional synchronous attendance with a video and a companion activity to encourage engagement. Instructors who teach large classes are often frustrated by lack of space in their classroom to do effective group projects and more active learning activities. A hybrid design could be used to create 2 or more groups of students, with only one group meeting face-to-face at a time in an alternating pattern. The students scheduled for face-to-face time would be working on such projects while the group scheduled for online work would engage in pre-recorded lectures, formative assessments, and individual practice. There are many other ways to structure the quantity of face-to-face and online course components in hybrid courses. Remember to use each mode in ways that make use of the relative strengths. Take steps to ensure that students are clear about what they need to do in each mode, especially in the online parts of the class. You may find that you need to scaffold student engagement in the online portions of the class by starting the tasks in the face-to-face parts of the class. Using points to incentivize engagement is also a useful strategy. Online classes are more common now than ever before. However, many current online classes have too little interaction between the instructor and students. Student-instructor interaction is required by accreditation and legislation. In this section, we will look at how to use an interaction approach to designing an online class. Course design as presented here begins with the development of outcomes, assessments, then objectives. Then we design ways for learners to attain these objectives. As we do this, it is important to recognize some of the fundamental differences between face-to-face and online classes. In face-to-face teaching, instructors can more easily monitor student progress and adjust instruction as needed. However, this is more challenging in online instruction due to the separation of the instructor from students in distance and time. Another factor is that content and instruction in most online courses is usually developed prior to the course start. This suggests that course designers need to take extra care in designing the ways we expect our students to learn the content we are teaching. One way to do this is to focus on an interaction approach to designing online instruction. This approach is based on the ideas that Muir put forward in 1989, where he identified 3 types of interactions in online learning: learner-content, learner-instructor, and learner-learner. Learner-content interaction. This is the interaction between the learner and the course content. It is essential for learning to occur. Without content interaction, the course is at best a social meeting of intelligent people. Examples of learner-content interactions include readings, lectures, presentations, self-guided research, projects, and discussions. Learner-instructor interaction. This interaction can help focus a student's interaction with the content, provide motivation, and correct errors in a student's path, trajectory, or understanding. For an interaction to be between the learner and the instructor, there should be a two-way communication. Examples of learner-instructor interactions include email, discussion forums, and synchronous conferences. Others include audio and video responses to student submissions and, increasingly, texting. Learner-learner interaction. This interaction occurs between students. Its importance depends on the situation. Some find learner-learner interaction necessary to give students a similar experience as a face-to-face class. Others find this type of interaction important in keeping students motivated. Examples of learner-learner interactions include discussions, synchronous conferences, and email. Increasingly, students are using audio and video responses and discussions. You can draw from successful face-to-face types of interactions as a model for creating online interactions. But be careful that you don't try so hard to adapt a face-to-face mode to the limitations of available technologies such that the activity becomes useless, pointless, or too difficult. Be careful about including too many different types of interactions in an online class, especially if doing so requires many different types of technologies. Remember that as you add cognitive load to students when you require them to learn a new technology, you are reducing their capacity to learn new content, and frustration can increase. Once you get accustomed to thinking about designing interactions for online classes, you will find yourself returning to a few standard activity structures for creating interactions. This is not a bad thing, but be careful that you don't unnecessarily limit your options by not looking beyond what you have always done. Take a moment to think about the interactions you have used or experienced and think about how those interactions contribute to learning of the content in the class. Think about how you could use that same kind of interaction in a class of your design, and think about what other interactions you would or would not combine with them and the reasons for this. Students in a HyFlex course can choose to take the class fully face-to-face, partially online, and partly face-to-face, or fully online. Online students may participate completely asynchronously, or in some designs, synchronously via video conferencing. This delivery mode permits students who are at a distance from the institution to participate completely online while permitting those who prefer more direct interaction with an instructor to be in a face-to-face classroom. Still, other students may use the flexibility of this mode to engage in the class mostly online, visiting the face-to-face class for more assistance on components of the class for which they need more assistance. This maximizes flexibility but requires some additional work to design and to teach. Because a HyFlex class has so many possible delivery options, it is important to know what technology is available to support the HyFlex class, and just as important to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the tools. It is also important to make sure that your potential students will be able to access and use the tools they need to engage with the class. If in doubt, choose tools that are more likely to work for more of your students, even if it means sacrificing some capabilities. The actual design of a HyFlex class will depend in part on how it will be delivered. One way is to design the course as a fully online asynchronous course with a teacher offering support to students both online and face-to-face during the class period. All students do the same assignments in the LMS. Another way of designing a HyFlex class is as an online synchronous course with the teacher providing primary, or at least significant content to be delivered in the face-to-face classroom with video conferencing for those students who are at a distance. The session would also be recorded for students who do not attend the live session. As with the asynchronous design above, students would complete the same tasks and assignments via the LMS. Another design approach is to differentiate the instruction and/or the assignments with students having the option of choosing the way they want to engage and then submit their work. This is a more complicated design and is more difficult to manage as an instructor. This type of design would work best with a class that is competency-based or with very clear course outcomes that can be assessed equitably in multiple ways. Enjoy designing your outcomes and objectives for the delivery mode of your choice. There are countless ways to design a course, each unique to the designer.